The air at Lot 17 hung thick with the scent of freshly turned earth and possibility. Larry Perez, a man whose hands knew the language of wood and steel better than any other, stood beside the wooden stakes that outlined his family's future. For the first time in his 42 years, he felt the solid weight of a dream taking root in actual soil. 2 acres. 2 acres of rolling Virginia countryside, nestled within the prestigious Stone Creek community, where he and his wife, Jane, had sunk every dollar of their life savings. This was it, the forever home. The guest house for his aging parents. The workshop where he'd one day teach his kids how to build something that lasts. The crunch of expensive loafers on gravel broke his reverie. Christine Roberts, president of the Stone Creek Homeowners Association, approached with the practiced poise of a monarch surveying her domain. Flanked by the 2 other members of the Architectural Control Committee ACC, a retired dentist named Arthur, and a woman whose expression suggested she found the very concept of new construction personally offensive. Christine stopped just short of the foundation stakes. She was immaculate in a cream-colored blazer, her blonde hair coiffed into a helmet of serene authority. "Larry," she began, her voice a smooth, polished stone. "Thank you for meeting with us for the pre-scheduled site review. The committee appreciates your proactive engagement." Larry offered a confident smile. He was a contractor. He understood process. He had submitted his plans months ago, a modern farmhouse design that was both beautiful and well within the community's architectural guidelines. He'd followed every rule to the letter. Of course. "Christine, we're excited to be part of Stone Creek. We just want to make sure everything is perfect from the start." Christine's own smile was a thin, bloodless line that did not disturb the placid surface of her face. She gestured toward the far corner of the lot, where the stakes for the detached guest house stood. Several neighbors, out for their morning walks, had paused at a respectful distance, their curiosity piqued by the official gathering. "It's about that structure," Christine said, her tone shifting from cordial to clinical. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding regarding the view easement under Fiber 8.4.2 of the covenants." She let the section number hang in the air. A small, perfectly formed weapon. "This structure, as planned, simply cannot be built." The words landed with a dull thud in Larry's chest. A misunderstanding. He had spent weeks with his surveyor poring over the county plat maps. There was no view easement on his property. "I'm sorry. Christine, I think you might be mistaken. My survey shows clear title. There's no easement recorded for this lot." Arthur, the dentist, cleared his throat nervously. "Well, the association's records indicate otherwise. Mr. Perez, the CC&Rs are quite clear on the matter of protecting community view corridors." Christine's smile tightened by a fraction. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, but it conveyed a universe of condescension. The association's interpretation of the governing documents is the one that matters here. "Larry," she said, her voice dropping just enough to be heard by the lingering neighbors. "This structure, as planned, is an obstruction. The board will be in touch with the formal requirements to rectify the situation." The dismissal was as clean and sharp as a paper cut. Without another word, she turned, her committee members falling into step behind her like well-trained courtiers. Larry stood alone amidst the wooden stakes, the scent of possibility now soured by the metallic tang of conflict. The public humiliation, though subtle, was a cold stone in his gut. He wasn't just a new homeowner anymore. He was a problem. That evening, the scent of Jane's marinara sauce did little to soothe the knot in Larry's stomach. Their kitchen table, usually a place of laughter and shared plans, was now a war room covered in documents. Spread across the oak surface were the thick binders they'd received at closing the Stone Creek CC&Rs, the bylaws, the community rules and regulations. "I've read it 20 times, Laura," Jane said, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. Her finger traced the text under the heading Section 8.4 Easements and Obstructions. She tapped subsection 8.4.2. Here it is. "No structure, planting, or other material shall be placed or permitted to remain, which may damage or interfere with any easement for the installation or maintenance of utilities, or which may unreasonably obstruct designated community view corridors." Larry leaned over her shoulder, the frustration of the morning still simmering. "See? It's completely vague. It says designated community view corridors. It doesn't define where they are. There's no map, no appendix, no legal description attached to my deed. If it's not on the county plat map, it doesn't legally exist." Jane sighed, closing the binder with a soft thud. She was a high school math teacher, a woman who believed in logic, in proofs, in things that added up. The ambiguity of the HOA's rules felt like an unsolvable equation, but she was so certain, and in front of everyone, it felt personal. "It felt like a shakedown," Larry corrected, his voice hard. He thought of the money every last cent poured into this land, into the architectural plans, the permits, the initial grading. Halting construction on the guest house would be a logistical and financial nightmare. It would violate his contract with his own build team, and, worse, it would mean breaking the promise he'd made to his parents. A knock at the back door startled them. It was Tom Bradley from next door, holding a six-pack of local IPA. Tom was a retired homicide detective who now worked part-time as a county sheriff's deputy to keep busy. He had a calm, observant demeanor that Larry had always found reassuring. "Saw the ACC pilgrimage this morning," Tom said, setting the beers on the counter. "Figured you could use one of these, or all 6. Larry gratefully twisted the cap off a bottle. "Thanks." "Tom, you have no idea." He quickly recounted the confrontation, the citation of a phantom easement. Christine's cool, dismissive threat. Tom listened intently, his expression unchanging. When Larry finished, he took a slow sip of his beer. "Christine Roberts," he said, more to himself than to them. "She runs the board like it's her own private kingdom. I've heard stories." He looked from Larry to Jane, his gaze steady. "Listen to me. Don't get emotional. Don't get into a shouting match. This is not a street fight. It's a paper war. The only thing that matters is what's in writing." He gestured to the pile of documents on their table. "You have your survey and the county records. That's your foundation. But from now on, you document everything. Every email, every phone call, every notice they send you. Keep a log. If she says something to you in the grocery store, go home and write it down with the date and time. Follow the paper trail. It's the only thing that will protect you." Jane looked at the imposing binder of CC&Rs. But what if the paper trail leads back to that vague rule? What if their interpretation really is the only one that matters? Tom finished his beer and set the empty bottle down with a decisive click. "Then, you find the paper that proves their interpretation is wrong, or that they created it improperly. People like Christine. They always leave a trail. You just have to know how to read it." His words, meant to be encouraging, sent a chill down Larry's spine. This wasn't a misunderstanding to be cleared up with a phone call. This was the beginning of something much larger. A battle to be fought, not with hammers and nails, but with certified mail and statutory citations. As Tom left, Larry looked at the stakes in his yard, silhouetted against the fading twilight. They no longer looked like the start of a dream. They looked like the front lines of a siege. The first volley in the paper war arrived exactly 1 week later. It wasn't an email or a phone call. It was a single sheet of paper, protected by a plastic sleeve, taped neatly to the temporary construction fence surrounding his property. The letterhead was crisp, embossed with the Stone Creek HOA logo. At the top, in bold, formal type, were the words, "Courtesy Notice of Covenant Violation." Larry's hands trembled slightly as he read the carefully worded text. It was polite, almost serene in its hostility. Dear Mr. Perez, this letter serves as a courtesy notice regarding a potential violation of the Stone Creek covenants, conditions and restrictions CC&Rs on your property at Lot 17. Following a site review by the Architectural Control Committee on October 5th, it has been determined that the planned construction of an auxiliary structure appears to obstruct a designated community view corridor, as prohibited under CC&Rs 8.4.2. Please be advised that all construction on the auxiliary structure must be halted immediately. You are required to submit a revised site plan to the ACC, relocating or removing the structure to remediate the obstruction within 10 business days of the date of this notice. Failure to respond or remediate the issue may result in the issuance of a formal violation notice, which may include the assessment of monetary fines and other enforcement actions as permitted by the association's governing documents and state law. We appreciate your cooperation in maintaining the aesthetic integrity and value of our community. Sincerely, the Stone Creek Board of Directors. The notice was unsigned, a sterile, impersonal declaration from a faceless authority. Yet Larry could feel Christine's fingerprints all over it. The precise citation, the immediate demand to halt work, the veiled threat of fines. It was all there, wrapped in the deceptively gentle language of a courtesy. This was the inciting incident, the formal challenge he had to meet. He was now officially in the system. The slow, grinding gears of the HOA enforcement machine had begun to turn. Following Tom's advice, Larry did not call the management company in a rage. He did not confront Christine at the community mailbox. Instead, he spent the next 2 days crafting a response that was as methodical and professional as their notice. He sat at the kitchen table with Jane, compiling their defense. He scanned his official property survey, which clearly showed the boundaries of his 2-acre lot, with no mention of any easements. He attached a copy of the county plat map, highlighting Lot 17 and the absence of any recorded restrictions. He even included a polite but firm letter explaining his position. To the Stone Creek Board of Directors, he wrote, I am in receipt of the courtesy notice dated October 12th regarding an alleged violation of CC&Rs for 8.4.2 on my property, Lot 17. In response, please find attached the official property survey and the county recorded plat map for the aforementioned lot. As you can see from these legal documents, there is no view corridor easement or any similar restriction recorded on my property. While I appreciate the board's commitment to maintaining community standards, the demand to halt construction is based on an unsubstantiated claim. The language in favor 8.4.2 refers to designated corridors, which implies they must be legally defined and recorded. Without such a designation on the official plat map or my deed, there is no violation. Construction will proceed as planned and as approved by the county. I consider this matter resolved and trust the board will update its records accordingly. He sent the entire package via email to the HOA management company and, for good measure, sent a physical copy via certified mail. Return receipt requested. The green slip from the post office felt like a small, solid piece of armor. He had followed the process. He had presented irrefutable evidence. He had been reasonable, logical, and firm. Surely, that would be the end of it. For a week, there was only silence. The construction crew continued their work, pouring the concrete slab for the main house. Every time a car slowed down on the street, Larry's stomach clenched, expecting to see Christine or a management company representative. But nothing happened. A fragile hope began to grow. Maybe they had reviewed his documents and realized their mistake. Maybe it was just an administrative error, a case of sloppy record-keeping. The hope was shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. The mail carrier, a cheerful woman named Barb, walked up his driveway holding not a letter, but a small green card and a rigid envelope. Certified mail. "Looks official," Barb said, handing him the clipboard to sign. Larry's signature was a nervous scrawl. He took the envelope inside, his heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. The weight of it felt wrong. It was too thick to be an apology. He slid it open with a kitchen knife. Inside was not a letter retracting the notice, but a multi-page document bound by a staple in the corner. The letterhead was the same, but the tone had shed its courteous pretense. It was cold, hard, and unforgiving. Formal notice of violation. Dear Mr. Perez, the Board of Directors is in receipt of your correspondence dated October 13th. After careful review, the Board has rejected your assertion that no violation exists. The authority to interpret and enforce the covenants, including the designation of community view corridors under Rear 8.4.2 rests solely with the Board of Directors, as outlined in the association's bylaws. Your failure to halt construction on the auxiliary structure constitutes a continuing violation of the CC&Rs. Therefore, this formal notice of violation is being issued. You are hereby summoned to a mandatory hearing before the Board of Directors on November 9th at 7:00 p.m. at the Community Clubhouse. You will have the opportunity to present your case at this hearing. Please be advised that you may bring legal counsel at your own expense. If the Board finds that a violation exists following the hearing, fines will be assessed at a rate of $100 for the initial violation, plus $50 for each day the violation remains uncorrected, retroactive to the date of this notice. Your continued noncompliance will result in further enforcement action, up to and including the placement of a lien on your property. The Board considers this matter of the utmost seriousness. Larry felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. The green certified mail slip in his other hand suddenly felt as heavy as a stone. They hadn't just ignored his evidence. They had dismissed it out of hand, claiming their interpretation trumped legally recorded property documents. They had scheduled a hearing, a trial, where they would be the judge, jury, and executioner. The fines, the threat of a lien. It was real. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was an attack. He looked out the window at the guest house foundation, where his parents were supposed to live out their golden years in peace. A line had been crossed. Christine Roberts wasn't just trying to enforce a rule. She was trying to break him. The formal violation notice felt like a declaration of war. Larry's first instinct was to hire the most aggressive lawyer he could find. But a quick search for attorneys specializing in HOA law revealed hourly rates that would bleed their construction budget dry in weeks. This was exactly what Christine wanted to drain their resources, to make fighting back more expensive than surrender. Jane, ever the pragmatist, laid out their bank statements on the table. We can't afford a legal battle right now. Lar, not a long one. The money we set aside for contingencies is already allocated to the lumber package, which is going up in price every day. We have to be smart about this. Tom said to follow the paper trail. Maybe we just haven't dug deep enough. Her words were a much-needed anchor in his sea of anger. She was right. He couldn't outspend Christine. but maybe he could out-research her. He needed more than just his own survey. He needed to understand the history of the document she was weaponizing against them. His first call was not to a lawyer, but to a local land surveyor's office. He explained the situation to the receptionist and was put through to a woman named Carol Jenkins. Carol was a semi-retired title clerk and researcher who now worked as a consultant for the firm. She had a voice like dry gravel and an audible relish for arcane property disputes. A phantom easement, you say? Carol chuckled. Oh, I love these. It's almost always one of two things: a sloppy developer who forgot to record something, or a power-tripping HOA board president inventing things to feel important. Let me guess. She's got a blazer for every day of the week and calls the governing documents sacred texts. Larry felt a flicker of hope. That's her exactly. Her name is Christine Roberts. There was a pause on the line, followed by a low hum of interest. Roberts. That name sounds familiar. The old Roberts farm used to own a big tract of land north of here. Let me pull the historical plat maps for Stone Creek. I'll start at the county recorder's office. If this easement of hers exists in any legal form, I'll find it. If it doesn't, I'll get you the proof you need to bury her in paperwork. Carol's fee was a fraction of a lawyer's retainer. Larry hired her on the spot. While she began her deep dive into the county archives, he focused on the HOA's own records, citing a state statute that guaranteed homeowners access to association records. He sent a formal, certified mail request to the management company for copies of all board meeting minutes from the past 2 years, along with any and all documents related to the interpretation or designation of community view corridors. A week later, a thick manila envelope arrived. The minutes were there, but they were a study in strategic obscurity. Entire paragraphs and sections were blacked out with a heavy marker. A cover letter from the management company explained the redactions were necessary to protect attorney-client privilege communications and sensitive homeowner information. It was a textbook stonewalling tactic. But one detail caught Larry's eye. The redactions were heaviest in the minutes from a meeting 6 months ago, the very month Christine Roberts had been elected board president. It was a clue, but one whose meaning was still shrouded in black ink. That Friday, Carol called with her initial findings. Okay, Larry, I've got good news and weird news, she said, her voice crackling with the excitement of the hunt. The good news is, you're 100% correct. I've gone through every deed, every plat amendment, every zoning variance filed with the county for the Stone Creek development going back 30 years. There is absolutely no view corridor easement recorded on or affecting your Lot 17. According to the county, your lot is clear. Larry felt a wave of relief wash over him. That's great. Carol, so I can just send this to the board and... Not so fast. Carol interrupted. Here's the weird news. The HOA is referencing an amendment in their internal records. An amendment I can't find in the public record anywhere. It's like it exists only within their own files. I spoke to a friend at the title insurance company that handled the original development. She says the developer, a company called Stone Creek Partners, LLC, did grant one specific view easement back in the day, but it was for Lot 2 on the other side of the development, to protect the view for the adjacent property, which is outside the HOA. Larry's mind raced. So they're trying to apply an easement from a completely different property to my lot. It's possible they're just incompetent, Carol mused. Or, it's possible it's deliberate. The adjacent property that benefits from the easement on Lot 2. Let me see. He heard the rustle of papers. It's owned by a holding company, but the holding company's registered agent is a family trust, the Roberts Family Trust. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. Christine's family. Bingo, Carol confirmed. Now, This doesn't explain why they're targeting your lot. It just establishes that the Roberts family has a history with view easements. But there's another wrinkle. I was looking at the original sales history for your parcel. Do you know who your family bought it from? My dad bought it years ago as an investment, Larry said, from an old family friend, a guy named Bill Patterson. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. Larry, Carol said slowly, her voice stripped of its earlier excitement. Bill Patterson was the managing partner of Stone Creek Partners, the original developer, and, according to the county transfer logs, 10 years ago, the Roberts Family Trust attempted to purchase your exact lot, Lot 17, from Bill Patterson. The sale fell through. 3 months later, your father bought it. The air went out of Larry's lungs. This wasn't about a view. It wasn't about a guest house. It was about a failed land deal from a decade ago. Christine's family had wanted his land, and his family had gotten it instead. This entire, manufactured violation was a personal vendetta, a punishment for an old grudge. Christine was using the full, impersonal power of the HOA to settle a private family score. He suddenly remembered the heavily redacted meeting, minutes from the month Christine took office. What had she proposed in those blacked-out paragraphs? Had she pushed through a clarification of FAR 8.4.2, creating this phantom easement out of thin air? All to target the son of the man who had bought the land her family lost. The discovery was a shot of adrenaline. He wasn't just a victim of bureaucratic overreach anymore. He was the target of a calculated, personal attack. And now, he had a motive. He had a trail. As he hung up the phone with Carol, Larry felt a new, cold resolve solidify within him. He wasn't just fighting for his home. He was fighting against a corruption that ran deeper than he could have ever imagined. The board hearing was less than 2 weeks away. The weight of Christine's personal vendetta settled heavily on Larry and Jane. It was one thing to fight a faceless bureaucracy. It was another to know you were being targeted by a woman nursing a decade-old family grudge. The battle felt dirtier, more personal, and Christine was about to make it even more so. One morning, just days before the scheduled hearing, a gleaming white truck from the city's Code Enforcement Division pulled up to their construction site. A man in a crisp uniform with a clipboard stepped out, his expression grim. Larry, who was on site reviewing blueprints with his foreman, felt an immediate, primal sense of dread. Larry Perez, the inspector asked, though it wasn't really a question. That's me, Larry said, wiping his dusty hands on his jeans. We received an anonymous complaint about illegal grading and improper erosion control on this site, the inspector stated, his eyes scanning the property. Says you've altered the natural drainage and are causing sediment runoff onto common areas. Larry was stunned. His erosion control was textbook. He had silt fences installed correctly, gravel entryways to prevent mud tracking onto the street, and his grading plan had been fully approved and stamped by the city engineer. He was a contractor. He knew the rules better than anyone. That's impossible, Larry said, walking the inspector over to the pristine silt fence. Everything is to code. You can see for yourself. We haven't had a drop of rain in 2 weeks. There is no runoff. The inspector was unmoved. He poked at the fence, measured the grade with a laser level, and made meticulous notes on his clipboard. The complaint alleges you did the primary grading work before your permit was finalized. It's a serious allegation. I'm going to have to issue a temporary stop work order until we can verify the permit timeline and conduct a full soil and drainage review with the city engineering department. He pulled a large, bright red sticker from his satchel. The words "Stop Work Order" were printed in thick, black letters. He slapped it onto the temporary construction fence, right next to the spot where Christine's courtesy notice had been taped. The sticker felt like a physical blow. How long will that take? Larry asked, the words catching in his throat. Could be a few days. Could be a couple of weeks, the inspector said with a shrug. Depends on engineering's backlog. You can't have any workers on site until this is cleared. Not one. As the city truck drove away, Larry's foreman just shook his head. This stinks. Larry, I've been doing this for 30 years. You don't get a surprise inspection on a blue sky day over an anonymous complaint unless someone with influence is pulling strings. Larry knew exactly who it was. The timing was too perfect, too cruel. Christine knew he was a contractor. She knew his reputation was his livelihood. More importantly, she knew a work stoppage, even for a week, would be financially devastating. It would throw his construction schedule into chaos, incur penalties with his subcontractors, and, most critically, drain the very funds he needed to fight her at the upcoming hearing. It was a strategic, personal attack designed to break his resolve and empty his pockets just before the final battle. That night, the mood in the Perez household was bleak. Jane went over the numbers, her face pale. Every day we're shut down costs us over $1,000 in crew and equipment rental fees alone, not to mention the delay penalties. 2 weeks of this, and our contingency fund is gone. We'll have to halt the whole project. Larry felt a surge of helpless rage. She's trying to bankrupt us before we can even get to the hearing. It was then that he received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Margaret, an elderly woman who lived 2 doors down. She had lived in Stone Creek for over 40 years and was the unofficial historian of the neighborhood. Her voice was thin and trembling. Larry, I need to speak with you, in person. It's about Christine. He met her on her back porch, surrounded by her prize-winning roses. She wrung her hands, her eyes darting nervously toward Christine's house. She came to see me yesterday, Margaret whispered. She knows the hearing is coming up. She knows many of us on the street don't agree with her interpretation of the view easement. She was lobbying for my support. What did she say? Larry prompted gently. Margaret took a shaky breath. It was more than lobbying. It was a threat. Years ago, my late husband, George, built our fence. He was off by about 6 inches. It encroaches slightly onto the common area behind our house. It's been that way for 30 years. Nobody has ever said a word. The HOA bylaws from that time even allowed for minor variances. She looked at Larry, her eyes filled with fear. Christine brought it up. She had a copy of a recent survey. She said that if I didn't vote in the board's favor at the hearing, or if I spoke up on your behalf, she would be forced, as part of her fiduciary duty, to cite me for the fence. She said the fines and the cost to move it would be thousands of dollars. Money I don't have. Larry felt sick. Christine was blackmailing an 80-year-old widow over a 6-inch fence discrepancy to secure a vote. It was a new level of depravity. She knows about the annual meeting coming up, too, Margaret added, her voice barely audible. She said my support for her leadership would be noted. This was the secondary moral dilemma, a twist he never saw coming. He now had proof of Christine's corruption, of her willingness to threaten and intimidate residents. But the proof was Margaret's secret. If he exposed Christine's blackmail at the hearing or the upcoming annual meeting, he would also be exposing Margaret's minor, decades-old fence violation. He would be dragging this kind, elderly woman into the middle of his fight, forcing her to face the very fines and public humiliation she was terrified of. He was faced with an impossible choice. He could use this information to destroy Christine's credibility and likely win his case, but at the cost of harming an innocent neighbor. Or he could protect Margaret, keep her secret, and try to win his fight on the merits of the evidence alone, a fight that was becoming more difficult and expensive by the day. As he walked home, under the darkening sky. The red stop work order on his fence glowed like a malevolent eye. Winning was no longer just about being right. It was about how he chose to win. The night of the annual HOA meeting felt like the premiere of a tense courtroom drama. The community clubhouse, usually reserved for potlucks and holiday parties, was packed. Over 100 homeowners sat in tightly arranged folding chairs, a testament to the simmering discontent that Christine's reign had fostered. At the front of the room, the 5-member board of directors sat at a long table. Christine positioned squarely in the center like a queen, holding court. Beside the podium, a large digital projector screen displayed the meeting agenda. A smaller digital clock in the corner of the screen was set to 05 CU0. This was the time allotted for each homeowner during the open forum. 5 minutes to make your case. 5 minutes to save your home. Larry sat beside Jane in the third row, a USB drive clutched in his hand. It contained his entire arsenal: the scanned property surveys, the county plat map, Carol's detailed research on the original easement deed for Lot 2, and the transfer record showing the Roberts family trust's failed attempt to buy his land. It also contained the crown jewel of his investigation, the unredacted board meeting minutes. After the city's stop work order, he had doubled down, hiring a paralegal to file a formal demand citing specific state statutes that made it illegal for an HOA to redact minutes related to rulemaking. Faced with a legal challenge they couldn't bluff their way out of, the management company had reluctantly sent him the clean copy. The meeting droned on with procedural formalities: the treasurer's report, the landscaping committee update. Christine presided with an air of serene control, her voice calm and measured. She looked out at the assembled homeowners, completely oblivious to the evidentiary bombshell Larry was about to detonate. Finally, she announced, "We will now move to the homeowner open forum. Each speaker will have 5 minutes. First on the list is Larry Perez." A murmur went through the crowd. Larry walked to the podium, his heart hammering against his ribs. He inserted the USB drive into the laptop connected to the projector. The countdown timer on the screen reset to 0500 and began to tick down in relentless red numbers. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "My name is Larry Perez, the owner of Lot 17. Many of you are aware that the board has cited me for a violation of FRABR 8.4.2, claiming my guest house obstructs a community view corridor. They have halted my construction, levied fines, and threatened to place a lien on my home." He clicked the remote. The first slide appeared on the screen. Evidence Exhibit, a official county plat map. 0445. This is the official, legally recorded plat map for Stone Creek from the county recorder's office. As you can see, Lot 17 is clearly delineated. There are utility easements marked, as required by law. What you will not find is any mention of a view corridor easement on my property. Legally, it does not exist. He clicked again. Exhibit B, the real view easement deed. 0418. My researcher, a professional title clerk, did find a view easement in the original development records. Here it is. It was granted by the developer to protect the view for a property adjacent to the community. As you can see, the deed specifies this easement is attached to Lot 2 on the opposite side of our neighborhood and benefits a property now owned by the Roberts family trust. A gasp went through the room. Heads turned toward Christine, whose placid expression was beginning to crack. The timer ticked down. 0350. So why is the board trying to enforce an easement on my property that belongs to another? That brings me to my next exhibit. He clicked. Exhibit C, unredacted board minutes. April 12th. 0332. These are the unredacted minutes from the first meeting after Mrs. Roberts was elected board president. I obtained them through a formal records request. I'd like to draw your attention to the section that was previously blacked out. He zoomed in on the text. It was projected in large, clear letters for everyone to read. President Roberts proposes a motion to formally clarify the board's interpretation of 408.4.2, empowering the board to designate community view corridors as needed to protect community aesthetics, without a formal vote of the membership or amendment to the plat map. Motion, seconded by Arthur Jones. Motion passes 3-2. The room erupted in angry murmurs. She gave herself the power, someone shouted from the back. Christine gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. This is a procedural clarification, well within the board's authority. Larry held up a hand. But why the sudden need for this clarification? Why the intense focus on my specific lot? He clicked the remote one last time. Exhibit D, conflict of interest. 0245. This is a public record of a failed property transaction from 10 years ago. It shows the Roberts Family Trust attempted to purchase Lot 17 from the original owner. The deal fell through. My family purchased the land shortly thereafter. Mrs. Roberts has never disclosed this personal and financial conflict of interest to the board or the community, as required by our own bylaws and state law. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. He had laid it all out, the non-existent easement, the real easement benefiting her family, the secret rule change she pushed through, and the decade-old personal grudge that served as her motive. 0210. He lowered his voice, turning his attention from the screen to the audience. He looked toward Margaret, who was watching him with wide, frightened eyes. He had made his decision. He would not betray her. Instead, he would give her the strength to free herself. This isn't just about my family, he said, his voice ringing with conviction. It's about a pattern of behavior. It's about a board president who believes the rules are for everyone but herself. A president who uses the power you have entrusted to her not to serve the community, but to settle personal scores. A president who is not above using intimidation and a pattern of pressuring residents through improper means to get what she wants. He paused, letting the phrase improper means land. He saw a flicker of recognition in Margaret's eyes, a straightening of her spine. He had given her a shield. And then, something incredible happened. From the back of the room, Margaret stood up. Her voice, though frail, was clear and steady. "He's right," she said, and all eyes turned to her. "President Roberts threatened me. She tried to blackmail me over a 30-year-old fence to secure my support." The room exploded. A dozen other hands shot up. One man stood and shouted, "She did the same to me. Threatened me with fines over my basketball hoop if I didn't vote for the dues increase." Another woman stood. "She denied my request for a disability ramp, saying it was aesthetically displeasing, until I threatened to file a fair housing complaint." The dam of fear had broken. Story after story of Christine's bullying and overreach flooded the room. The timer on the screen showed he still had over a minute left, but Larry's work was done. He hadn't just won his case, he had ignited a revolution. The fallout from the annual meeting was swift and decisive. The room, charged with a sense of righteous anger, had transformed from a passive audience into an active body of governance. Tom Bradley, speaking not as a deputy, but as a homeowner, used his knowledge of procedure to channel the outrage into action. He made a formal motion from the floor to censure President Christine Roberts for violating the association's conflict of interest policies. It passed with a thunderous roar of aye. He immediately followed it with a second motion to commission an independent. third-party audit of the HOA's records and finances for the duration of Christine's presidency. The motion included a specific mandate to investigate the approval process for all rule clarifications and the history of fines and violations levied under her leadership. This also passed unanimously. The representative from the professional management company, a young man who had been sitting quietly in the corner, looked horrified. He was on his phone before the vote was even tallied, no doubt informing his superiors that their client, the Stone Creek HOA, was in open revolt against its own leadership. The illusion of orderly control was shattered. The final, and most critical, motion was for a recall vote. Tom read the specific bylaw that allowed for the removal of a board member with a petition signed by 25% of the homeowners. Within minutes, a sign-up sheet was circulating through the room, and it quickly garnered signatures from more than half the residents present. The board was in complete disarray. Arthur and the other committee member who had supported Christine stared blankly, the foundation of their authority having crumbled beneath them in less than 5 minutes. Christine herself sat frozen, her face a mask of disbelief and fury, as the community she had ruled with an iron fist systematically dismantled her power, piece by procedural piece. Weeks later, the dust had settled, leaving a dramatically altered landscape. The recall election was a landslide. Christine Roberts was removed from the board of directors in a resounding rebuke. Arthur, her key ally, resigned in disgrace the following day. A special election was held, and Tom Bradley, along with 2 other reasonable, service-oriented homeowners, were elected to fill the vacant seats. The new board's first official act was to hold an emergency session. They formally rescinded the violation notice against Larry Perez, waiving all fines and issuing a formal letter of apology on behalf of the association. They immediately suspended the improperly adopted clarification of Ferber 8.4.2, pending a full review and a vote by the entire community, the Red Stop Work Order, which had been cleared by the city a week after the meeting once Larry presented his case, was now just a bad memory. The sounds of hammers and saws once again filled the air at Lot 17. The community, newly energized, voted to adopt a sweeping set of new transparency policies Tom proposed. All board meetings were to be recorded, minutes were to be published without redaction, and any changes to rules or regulations would require a 30-day comment period for homeowners and a majority vote of the membership, not just the board. The era of secret governance was over. One sunny Saturday afternoon, as Larry was overseeing the framing of the guest house, he saw Margaret walking up his driveway. She carried a small envelope in her hand. "Larry," she said, her smile warm and genuine, "I never properly thanked you. You gave me the courage to speak up. You freed me. And you freed this entire neighborhood." "You were the brave one, Margaret," Larry said. "You're the one who stood up." She shook her head. "We did it together." She handed him the envelope. "The new board has started a community fund. It's to provide legal aid for residents who might face board overreach in the future. So, no one has to fight alone like you did. This is my first donation. I wanted you to have it." Larry opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $100 and a small note. For the fence sitters. It read, "A little help to get on the right side." He looked at Margaret, then at the frame of the guest house rising against the blue sky. A structure built not just of wood and nails, but of resilience and principle. He and Jane had fought for their home, but in the end, they had helped rebuild their entire community. The true foundation, he realized, wasn't the concrete beneath his feet, but the shared trust of the neighbors standing beside him.